only night actively practicing in almost all of South Ohio. There were plenty of knights around. They just didn't come to practice. So what am I supposed to do? I mean, reasonably saying, I'm not necessarily saying I'm better than everybody else, but to get, there were a lot of new fighters. It's a little challenging. How do you make a practice a place? It's got to be a place where every single fighter at the practice can get better. If it's not, then it's a waste of time for everybody. So you have to have something for the least fighter to do, and you have to have something for the best fighter to do. Now what that usually happens is the senior fighter needs to come up with some creative ways, like I'm going to go out and fight nothing but single sword. Well, if your fight is nothing but single sword, the least fighter with a sword and shield will typically give you enough of a run to raise your blood pressure. Because you have to train your technique and your intensity. And the problem is you see people train one or the other. I see lots of intensity with no technique. I see technique but no intensity. And what that gives you is you see guys who should be winning fights, you should be doing better, and they go to a tournament. So they're at a practice where they're the best guy, the best fighters at that practice. And then they roll out to a tournament list where there are some real cold-blooded killers, and they get blown out of the water because they've mastered the art of executing about half of what they're capable of because they're, well, I'm gonna downgrade my fighting because Drengi's not up to my level. Beyond the fact that that's very, very egotistical, it doesn't help him and it doesn't help me. If I have to gauge down, if I think I need to do that, the problem is it might be true. So what do? So maybe I fight him only on my knees, or maybe I fight him only with a buckler and let him bring his best form. He's driving my intensity, yet we can still both train fighting at our best. First and foremost, that's what you've got to do at your practice. You have to. You can choose to do, you can do whatever you want, but you have to ask yourself, are you satisfied with where you are as fighters? And I personally am never satisfied where I am as a fighter. Never. This is my 34th year fighting. I probably should be a lot better. But learning and unlearning and relearning new techniques that have evolved in 34 years that's part of it. But the other thing is how do you keep driving the level of practice? So part of it is figuring out ways to work yourself. There was a practice where Angus and I were the only fighters there who'd been fighting more than 6 months. We fought the whole practice left-handed, single sword. Got blistered. I submit that the problem with most practice is the fighters are afraid of looking foolish, like you think you should be winning. Don't worry about winning. Don't worry about winning at practice for sure. So what we started to do was create a whole bunch of crazy, I don't know if they're crazy, a whole bunch of drilling techniques that allowed us to train all of the fighters at one time. Now, not for the whole practice. So our typical practice structure is everybody comes in, puts your kit on, maybe does a little warm-up. Some of you took my in-fight class. So we try and put together a drill. The first thing about drills is they cannot be lengthy or tedious. I can give you a list of just 100 good drills. We do one drill. Maybe we just do one. We take 10 minutes out of the practice and talk about technique. And we'll take jump ball. What would you guys like to work on this week? Maybe I have an idea. Maybe somebody says, hey, I'm having trouble with this. All right, let's get a little 10-minute practice. We'll work on that thing. Then let everybody loose to spar. Okay? So sparring is where you can still work on your technique because you're not going all out. Part of the training must be all-out combat. Another big problem is people roll out to tournament and they're sparring, and the guys who are there to win are not sparring. They're there to shoot a hole in your head and move along. And, banish all this, well, I just want him to have to use some great trick, or I'm just getting... The guys at the top of the food chain, the fighters at the top of the food chain in this organization, beat people in tournament and think about them for exactly 0.9 seconds longer and move on. And you making them work is not what gets you where you want to be. You got to get out there and start training to prepare yourself for that kind of fight. Most of them just win because they're better prepared. They step out. I don't know how many times I go to tournament list, and what do the marshals say? Take your guard. And people are standing around like this. Marshal just said take your guard. Take your guard. Put yourself on guard and get yourself in a mental frame that's ready to fight. If you don't do that, the lounging into the fight, if that's your mental attitude, it's tough to overcome the inertia of that when you actually have somebody out there who's trying to beat your brains in with a stick. So you got to change what you think about how you're going to train. So little things. That's one for me. When the marshals call on your guard, I am on my guard. In fact, I usually go right up to the line. I want my opponent to know I'm ready to fight. I want me to know I'm ready to fight. That last piece is part that you have to train. Study, practice, spar, fight. You have to do all four of those things in practice, assuming you're physically capable. You know, if you got somebody who's injured, okay, but you can get them involved. We run a bear pit at the end of most of our practices where we even have the youth fighters in. And everybody goes, well, we're not youth authorized. All right, well, you use youth weapons and everything, you got youth marshals there, you can run it. And everybody understands. Because the biggest thing you got to take out of your practice is ego. If you're at practice counting how many fights you win, you're a problem. You are the problem. And if counting, and I mean, that's very serious about this. I've been in practices where there's fighters who march around the edges of practice not fighting, the tough fighters. And I won't necessarily even say that they're beating up or bullying the lesser skilled fighters, but they're there to get some kind of aggrandizement for their ego. They're bad for your practice. And if you're the senior fighter, you need to go and fix that problem by talking to them nicely, by getting a marshal if necessary, by finding a member of the chivalry, etc. But you cannot drink from a poison well. Your practice has to be, and it doesn't have to mean everybody wants to practice the same way, but there can't be anybody actively degrading your practice, okay? So you set up some time, you get everybody warm, you do a drill, you spar to work, and sparring is to work on your skills. It's a three-quarter speed. Angus and I train a lot. We try and go about 3/4 and really work, and that's where you can talk. I threw this shot and I didn't get there. Maybe Angus sees something. Because a big part of training that you don't see is two people go out and fight. And I get this all the time because I'm wearing one of these. What'd you think? Well, I think you don't know what to do with your feet. I think you really ought to find a grip on a shield that works, and I think that you're holding the wrong end of the sword, son. That's what I really think. Now, probably if I was to go say that, that would be soul-crushing, and that's not my job. But asking somebody, what do you think, versus saying, I'm trying to throw the leg wrap and it's not working, what could I do better? You get specific answers. Shiv love to talk about fighting. They love to. But when you ask some kind of generalized question, they're going to say something like, you say, what do you think? And they're going to say, no, I thought you were doing fine, man. You're fine. Just keep working on what you're working on. That helped exactly nobody. The knight's like, thank God that's over. And the fighter's like, I'm awesome. And then they go back to their practice and get their teeth kicked in. You know, so you got to make it a joint effort. Now, eventually, it's you training. You have to decide to train. I train by myself a lot. At practices full of people, and I just recognize that when I'm going 3/4, somebody's going to go 100%, and I can't make them not go 100%. Those are choices. Okay. So, how do we get everybody working on some things? So, the first thing is you need some tactics to build a skill set that helps you win fights. So what we did with our practice was we take the last, let's say, 30 minutes, and it depends. Your mileage may vary based on what you've got in terms of a time window. So think about it and talk about it and see what can withstand. So what I'd like to do is get everybody in kit, and we're going to run our practice drills. So I'm going to tell you what they are, though, first. So what we did is we conceived of some bear pits where we changed the rules. Sometimes we don't even tell the people in the bear pit we've changed the rules. I'll get to that. So our first bear pit that we use a lot is called one and done. Any legal hit, and you're out of the pit. Double kills, everybody's out of the pit. No refights. I'm adamant, and everybody who trains me, we do not do refights. You got hit, you're out. One and done moves the pit very, very fast. So if you got a big group, one and done is a really good tool. Plus, it teaches you not to trade head hits for leg hits. In fact, it teaches you not to trade any hits, which you shouldn't be. You should not be trading any part of you to hit somebody else. Okay? So we do one and done. We do wounds retained. I mean, probably most of you are familiar with that. You take all blows for the crown. If you get legged and manage to win the fight, you stay in the pit, legged. Okay? Winner stays, loser goes to the end of the line. We do one called progressive pain. So progressive pain is, let's say you got 8 fighters at your practice. So 1 to 8, the first 7 passes through the pit, it's one and done. The second, 2 and you're through. The third, 3 for free. Fourth is just ugly. But the point of it is to force you, when you hit somebody, to hit them again, to make sure that they've taken. And what happens is people hit and they admire their handiwork, and then they get clubbed 4 or 5 times. So progressive pain is a drill. In the 4th round, you have to put 4 hits on the opponent to get him out of there. And if you admire your first or even your second hit, I happen to train with some guys who will hit you 9 times while you're admiring how great your that leg shot looked. Occasionally, when we have somebody training for Crown, we did this to His Majesty. I told the guys in line, I said, just don't take anything he hits you with. Just don't take it. Because one of the things you have to learn to do is finish fights. It's probably the single weakest skill we have in the entire kingdom after footwork, which is generally pretty weak. But people don't finish fights. They don't know how to push through. Progressive pain teaches you that, or with random no-take. And so every time Cadigan would come up against somebody, and he would lay, I mean, he put a bruise on my leg, my arm, and I just waded in and kept hitting him. And he was like, what's going on? Wasn't that leg shot? Oh, that leg shot was great, Cadigan. I'm just not taking it, you know? And you can do that. And then the last part of this, and so the last kind of drill is called a meat grinder. So most people, this is an old school drill. A meat grinder is, so let's say, here we are. This is almost too big of a group to do a meat grinder. That would be very painful. Angus is the first person in line. Angus goes in the pit. Second person in line charges into the third person in line, counts 10 Mississippis. At 10 Mississippis, he yells time. The person fighting Angus leaves, next person goes in. There's no taking or calling of blows. It's 10 seconds of unrelenting force on the person in the pit. Angus must fight every person in line. Now you think 10 seconds is not much. 7th, 8th, 9th opponent. My goal in a meat grinder is to throw one good blow at every person that I fight. When Angus has fought everybody in line, Angus goes to the end of the line, the next person goes in the pit, wash, rinse, repeat. The more painful Komar special meat grinder is the person in the pit is on their knees. That's old school grind. Now let me tell you about all those things. A key feature of all the drills we do is you are allowed to cheer in line. You're allowed to hoot and holler, support fighters. When you're tired, you're allowed to walk out of the list. I am not, one of the things I dislike is our culture. We sort of have this machismo culture of fighting where like you gotta die in the list. No matter how tired you're hurt, we're gonna fight through. Stoicism is overrated. The graveyards are littered with fighters who could have been somebody because they fought when they were injured. There's a big difference between hurt and injured. I am hurt all the time. I participate in a contact sport. We're all going to be nicked and banged up. But when you are injured, when you have a legit injury, you need to be not on the list. You should be working on your marshal's paperwork and coming out to practice anyways and supporting. We went through some stretches in the last 10 years with our practice where somebody's been injured, they come and they still support and train, because part of the thing we don't get to do at Crown, you know, when the fighter from your local group is there and everybody's there behind him, you can't really cheer. You can't yell in from the sidelines, you can't coach. So we use practice as an opportunity to build each other up and support ourselves as a community of fighters, and it makes a big difference. When the last 2 fighters are left, and even the senior fighters have blown out, and the 19-year-old kids out there still swinging the stick, what do we always do that last fight? There's 2 guys up, all right, all for the crown, loud marbles. Whoever wins this gets to be king. Let's see it. And everybody's applauding and cheering to get that last fight out. Because you got to change the culture of your practice if you really want to take it on in stages. I can teach you all the drills in the world, but if you don't change the culture of the way you practice, the way you think about practice, and how you treat your opponents and your friends, how you make a practice, when I go to practice, I come out. If you come to one of our practices and you still need more fighting, we did something wrong. We are usually completely blown up, and yet energized. There's a video in my stream of one of these meat grinders, and I was the last guy and Angus was the first guy. So the 2 worst positions in the meat grinder are first guy and last guy. So Angus is first in, he fights everybody, then he has to fight each person individually. I have to fight each person individually, and then I have to fight everybody. In this last fight, I can't lift up my shield. I can't hold my shield up. And Angus and we're like this, we're like looking at each other. And I pulled up my sword one time and I knew he had no defense, and I just whammo. But he had 3 seconds left and I couldn't pick my sword back up, and he just creases me. You know, again, maybe a little extreme. You don't have to go all the way there, but the point of it is that we're here as a community to get better, to support each other, and don't worry about winning. Don't worry about knighthood. Worry about making your technique better by developing training strategies that will help you get better. Winning will come. Winning is hard to chase. I'm not a big fan of you got to be a winner. Winning's the only thing. Well, so what happens when I lose? I'm nothing? No, just somebody better than me probably won the fight, and maybe what I just need to do is go back and train a little more diligent or study a little harder. You know, one of the things about it is if you go to a tournament and say, I've done everything literally within my power to get it to be as good as I can today, and I still lose, then I just say, all right, I need to work a little harder. You know, within reasons of our lives and our relationships and our jobs and our hobbies, you know, but training needs to be fun. I love going to practice. We have so much fun at practice, and we work our butts off. So, before I move on to anything else, any questions? Anybody want to agree with me, disagree with me? Think I'm full of shit? It's okay. All right. So, one other point about practice. One of the reasons we like to do all these barefoot drills is the single thing that is the thread through all our practices is footwork. If you don't have footwork, you have nothing.